What's going on, guys? I'm Old Painless, and today we are checking out Generation Toy's sixth and final member from their Gravity Builder team, and of course I'm referring to Crane, who is an aptly named version of Hook from the Constructicons. Now this figure has been delayed quite some time, and there's some perks to that actually. We'll talk about that in just a second here, but just to give you guys a heads up, we are going to be looking at Crane exclusively today, and then in a following video, hopefully within the next day or two, I'll have a full review for the combined Gravity Builder form, and we'll also be taking a look at the entire team in that review, where we can see all 6 bots as well as all 6 alt modes, and then finally the combined Devastator finished form. So today we're focusing on exclusively on Crane, and we're going to check out alt mode. We'll check out transformation into his combined mode, which is pretty straightforward, and then we'll get into the actual robot. So first things first, a quick look at the packaging. We can see the standard Generation Toy box here. We have the nice painted rendition of Crane there in the front. Looks pretty nice. Same textured packaging, same foam insert, all that fun stuff. Nothing new. Generation Toy really excels in the packaging department and presentation, so good stuff. Included, we get a replacement head. We'll show this off in more detail and talk about this when we get to the bot mode. We also do get a replacement screw for that head in case you lose one, and then a combined mode face. The screaming face, which is this guy here, we'll show this off again in more detail when we do the combined mode review. This comes pre-installed. I swapped it out for the more stoic looking face mask instead, but you get that in a little baggie. You are good to go. Per usual, instructions, same type of stuff. Actually pretty long this time, and they show off some really neat things which have only been recently shown in some of the photographs and stuff online, like using the combiner gun for a like a giant cannon for the bots to use, which is pretty cool. But they do a really good job of illustrating how to get from point A to point B and so forth. I'm a fan of Generation Toy's instruction manuals. And the big one, I mentioned because the figure was so delayed, if you buy Crane from a reputable retailer, Generation Toy has introduced what they call Megasari, which is a clear plastic rendition of a Build-A-Figure Megatron. Initially they're offering a colored plastic version, which it was basically a pre-order incentive. If you had ordered all 6 figures from an online retailer, they're including that as a free bonus, as like a loyalty type of program. But Generation Toys, because they were, again, mega sorry about the delays for the last 2 figures and finishing off this whole combiner, they're giving us a clear plastic version, and this comes included for free with Crane, which is friggin' awesome. It's Build-A-Figure. We're not going to dwell on this too much, but you can see it all comes on sprues. You got to take that all apart and build it yourself. And again, all clear plastic. It looks pretty sweet, actually. I'll be doing that later on. And then also, we get some bonus goodies here, and an instruction manual for the replacement parts and pieces. I guess we get some replacement parts for the combiner, sliding joints and springs and whatnot. Replacement hips for long haul for the combiner mode. And then we also do get some like hand fillers for the combiner hands and whatnot. I'll be looking at these in more detail. A lot of these, since I've combined my figure, don't seem all that necessary, but at least they're being proactive. They're including all these bonus parts here in case your figure is running into some trouble. They got you covered. Alright, well, let's jump into the alt mode here. As you can see, Crane is, well, he's a crane, so it's pretty cleverly named. Good stuff there, Generation Toys. It looks really good. Has the same, again, green, silver, and purple accents throughout the alt mode here, which look quite nice. Quite a bit more paint and detailing on this alt mode versus their long haul that came out previously. You do see a lot more silver kind of mixed in, little silver accents, especially along the crane and stuff going up. You can see some detailing all the way up through this crane arm. A lot more of that striping that I talked about in my long haul review that I thought was lacking on that figure. You get a lot more visual accents on this alt mode, which is really nice. And you can see the crane arm does extend fully up, which is pretty cool. Working pistons, very nice. Rotates. It can't rotate inward because it is obstructed by the combiner head storage right there. But you do get plenty of motion with that crane arm. The tip extends not as far as I'd like it to, but they did this specifically to accommodate a bend at this joint here, which we'll show that off more in the bot mode. But basically that's kind of like the bone crusher and scavenger knee joint. And this allows you to sort of bend the crane arm and fold it in half to be less obtrusive in the combined mode or for the robot mode for this guy. Pretty cool little additional tip. This has a little hinge system here, and I believe this hook actually is die cast. Not 100% sure, but it does feel a little bit cooler to the touch, so that's kind of cool. And then this actually flips up, and I have no idea why. So, neat, I guess. I don't know. I don't think that pulls any further either. No. So that's the furthest the crane can extend as far as I can tell. I will note that this feels pretty good. I like the ratchets on this rotation. I just really wish that the teeth were a little bit tighter on this rotation joint, because you can see it kind of flops around a little bit. So that's a bummer. I mean, that's a big gap right there. It's not game breaking when you have it in the combined mode or the alt mode. I mean, you can easily pose this however you want it to. It really won't be flopping around too much, but it would have just been a nicer and more polished product if this could kind of maintain a solid location versus moving around so much. But is what it is. On both sides of the vehicle, you can actually pull out these stabilizers. These are pretty nice. They have kind of that nice metallic silver and gold-ish colored pistons there, I guess, or stabilizers. Works pretty well. So you can kind of have it set up like that. And again, it's on both sides. I do think the back is a little messy. You can see the back of the combiner head, which it actually blends in fairly well, but it looks a little odd, obviously, sitting right there, a big black and silver chunk. This is kind of a really bizarre design choice. I don't really know what these are supposed to be. They almost look like rockets or something within this like silver border. Yeah, I don't know. It is a little gappy, though, that you can see in the back here. Just a little off-putting, but not too bad. And then on the front, you can see we do have some clear plastic with orange painted headlights. Some more silver and darker colored accents throughout. And then some clear plastic up here too, which is pretty cool. A nice little touch. This can rotate up, and you can see some silver engine detailing and stuff on the inside. Yeah, I like that. I think it looks pretty good. And then again, the clear silver cockpit here, or cabin for the vehicle, and weapon storage. You can see the guns actually sitting inside right there. So for alt mode, Crane has weapon storage and as well as combiner mode. So no worries about hiding that or losing that weapon. The only weird choice, I'd say, would be this color back on this, I guess, cabin for the crane. I would have preferred if they hadn't really even painted these blue. Maybe just left it all black, or maybe more of like a darker gray color. It's not really that off-putting. It's just kind of an odd choice because none of the other windows on any of the other figures are, painted blue. And it does blend fairly well. If it's in low lighting, it kind of blends all together, kind of like that. I guess you can still tell it's blue, but it's not quite as much of a contrast. But again, this is super nitpicking. This doesn't really bother me. I know it's bothered other people though, but I can understand why. Obviously, that might bother some folks. The one thing I do want to point out is that obviously, well, we do have these ladders and whatnot here, but it's a little gappy right here. This is a joint where the bot will split in half and rotate along this pivot, and that's obviously for the combined mode. I do wish that peg was just a touch tighter because it gets a little gappy. No matter how much I'm kind of pushing that in, it tends to kind of just split a tiny bit. Not so bad for the vehicle mode. Obviously, it's not an issue for the combined mode, but it is a little bit more apparent on the robot mode, so I wish that could have been cleaned up just a touch better. But the good thing is it doesn't really split apart on its own, just no more than that little gap that you see right there. But yeah, that's pretty much it for vehicle mode. I think overall this fits in the look and feel of the Generation Toys updated construction vehicle design. He looks great with the other vehicles. Again, my next review which should be out very soon. We'll actually have all 6 robots in alt modes and robot mode, so you can kind of see the entire team breakdown. But I really just want to show off this guy today, so you can kind of get a feel for how the 6th member is shaping up. Well, with that being said, guys, I want to get him transformed into the combiner mode, so let's go ahead and jump into it. What we want to do here is just split along this joint. You can see it's held in by a peg right there. And then just rotate along that assembly right there. Now do make sure this little tab is pushed up, and we'll worry about these 2 components in just a little bit. But first things first, let's peg this all together like so. That's the back side right there. This is where the combiner from dump truck, the back section is going to peg in to kind of help secure this all into place. But next thing we want to do is just loosen up these flaps on the side of the head. We can kind of lift this up like so. Unpeg the crane section from the green part here. We can kind of loosely push that off to the side. The crane and head assembly are on a series of kind of hinges here, which rotate around a single axis. So we can kind of unpeg this, lift up the head, and then rotate this around like so. What you basically want to do is get this head assembly, which is on this sort of double or triple hinged neck component. We want to get this section kind of rotated towards the center point right there. You can kind of rotate the head around to this point. Don't really tab it or lock it down yet, because what we want to do is get the head, this portion here, rotated 180, and it'll come down, and we just collapse these front tabs around the combiner head, making that a nice solid piece. This whole section is obviously on the back side now as we've rotated that around. And what we want to do here is get this clear plastic piece pulled up. There is a little tab section here, which is going to pop, I apologize for the light, but it's going to pop into this section here. So it kind of tabs into that green right there next to the engine block. And then this comes back down, and it'll actually click back into place. So that actually locks this whole neck joint here together for you. Alright guys, so sorry for the cut right there, but I had a bit of a panic moment. You might have saw that this got really loose, and this actually popped off altogether. Now it's designed on this gray section here. You can kind of see a little bit of a split here. It's designed to actually slide off, so you can actually remove this as a weapon. But what actually had happened was the screw from the inside of the crane came undone from this lower gray platform. It started getting progressively looser and looser as I was doing that transformation process there till it popped off. So I thought I had broken my figure. And if you have been keeping up on the message boards and whatnot, there have been some rumors that some of the cranes have been recalled due to incorrect size screws being used. So I think I found an instance where this actually was one of the shorter screws in the crane assembly, because it definitely shouldn't have popped off like that. The good news is, if you notice, let me grab a little tool here so I can point some stuff out. If you notice these 2 screw holes here, this guy and this guy, if you just undo those 2 screws, it actually splits this assembly here, and that actually gets you access to the ratchet on the inside. But more importantly, I was able to reattach the screw nice and tight, which is part of the ratchet system on the crane arm, and then just reassemble this base part. Now I don't know if that's a permanent solution, if it's going to get looser over time. I may need to throw some, maybe a little bit of glue or something in there. I don't know the best way to handle that, aside from maybe replacing the figure with the updated versions, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in final thoughts. But the good news is that this was an easy fix. Literally took me just 2 to 3 minutes to figure out what had happened. And the good news now is that that waggling crane arm is way tighter now. I mean, it has some give between the tooth ratchet, but it's not flopping around like it was before. So the actual ratchet is nice and tight now on that crane assembly. So if you do end up getting a crane figure where the crane arm did feel a touch loose, that might be an easy fix which you can address within that section right there. Now back on topic, we have the die-cast elbow or shoulder joints pulled out. The bot is basically put together. A couple things which you can do is rotate that down on that joint right there, and that gets you a smaller figure from front to back for the combined mode if you want to go that route. Again, this can attach to the weapon if you want to. And then also the chest plate, these two holes here go onto this peg and this peg right here. There we go, just like so. But that is basically the upper torso done for Generation Toys Gravity Builder. I do want to point out that in my post on the TFW forums, I mentioned this felt a little bit loose, but I think if you really put enough pressure onto that joint, well, it just fell off as I'm saying that. It does feel fairly secure if you really get a nice push on there. I wish there was maybe a third joint or a third peg where that could secure into. I mean, it feels okay right now. It's not really popping off, but if you give it enough of a hit, this is going to come right off. So not the best way to secure the chest piece. That's a bit of a bummer. But guys, let's get this back into the vehicle mode, and then we'll get him into the actual robot mode to check him out too. So, be right back. Oh, one really quick note here before we cut to the bot mode transformation. This little tab here, I forgot to mention, actually folds down, and that further locks the upper torso together. So you actually have this tab, holding everything into place, which is really nice. This feels really secure. So this tab in conjunction with these two front bumper pieces, which I'll show off in the transformation in a second, these help keep the legs sort of tabbed and strongly put together. And then this joint here is what keeps, as well as the tabs on the inside, keeps this all nice and tight. So, alright guys, just want to make sure we pointed out that little joint. But yeah, we're good to go. Alright, so through the magic of video editing, we have him back in his alt mode, and now we're going to take him into his robot mode. So let's get that all started. And first things first, I like to just raise the crane to get that out of the way more than anything. But let's target this front bumper. Just sort of untab this whole front assembly together. It's a pretty strong connection, just like so. And these are actually attached together kind of like on Mixmaster's front bumper. They have that little tab assembly, like the little triangle shape, which kind of hooks these together. Make sure you get this folded up first and foremost. I neglected to do that, as you just saw, but get that up and out of the way. We'll come to the underside. Now the feet are actually really secure. They're tabbed together in the middle. The exterior of each toe is actually attached to this gray plastic piece too. So we kind of want to split the legs a little bit to separate these and give us some room to play with, and then pull these toes, away from the tire section, and we can lift these up and over and spin those out. Rotate these sections to kind of get them out of the way, because we want to then rotate the lower legs down. Nice and easy. Pull these sections to the side, and then let's go ahead and rotate these inner calf sections down. And that just kind of helps flesh out the lower leg to make it look a little bit fuller. And before we go any further, we can rotate these whole leg assemblies 180. I think that's a really cool touch. Nice and simple. And we can also get the weapon out finally. So flip open the canopy here, pull your gun out. We'll look at that in a moment. And then we can kind of collapse these windows down, rotate this section down, and then gravity will hold this piece down nice and tight to the lower leg. Coming back here, we want to rotate the wheel in. It has a nice soft sort of click to it. And then the feet, you can rotate this lower assembly below the wheel, fold that underneath, and then actually has like a nice soft click there as well. So this joint here will kind of lock into place next to this whole wheel panel, so it's nice and secure. And then from here, we just rotate the heel out. Much more substantial heel spur than we had on Mixmaster, much thicker. And it actually has a solid sort of, not a locking mechanism, but when you fold it out, this actually abuts up next to that green plastic point, so it doesn't go any further out. So it's a nice, solid feeling foot assembly when you're all done. And that's basically your legs done. We're going to touch on this leg kibble in a moment, but the instructions tell you to have them up against the thighs like so. So let's go ahead and get this guy transformed on his upper body. This whole assembly, we'll kind of rotate that down for now. Unpeg the hands from each other. And then kind of grab down by the shoulder here. You can see there's a nice ratcheted joint. Feels nice and tight. Nice juicy clicky ratchets there. And then from here we can just unpeg the shoulder kibble just to get out of the way for now. And this is interesting. There's two flaps here which cover the hand. We can fold both down, get the hands rotated out per usual. And I was really perplexed by why they would have two different hand flaps. These are actually designed for the combined mode. So when you have this in his torso configuration, this actually acts as a torso filler and helps to kind of cover up some of the gaps in the combined mode. So really clever. I didn't know what that was for until I actually popped the whole figure and combined it all together. So pretty cool. What I neglected to mention is rotate this entire arm down 180, because then this fills in the entire gap right there on the shoulder. And then again, get your hands all set. So this backpack assembly is a little tricky, but it's not too bad once you figure out what's going on. Literally just push this straight up, and this was really tight at first, but you want to make sure you get this clicked all the way in like there. And before you go pegging anything else in, flip out this little tab just like so. Make sure this is folded back in when you go to combined mode. You don't want that out because it kind of interferes with some stuff. But once that's folded up, unattach the crane assembly here, rotate that up along that joint, and now this little piece we just folded out is going to peg into the base of the gray crane. So it actually creates a platform extension to secure the crane piece into. And with that attached, you can fold that down, and then the back green platform here actually pegs into the back of the robot. Fold up that head, flip out this little purple piece because that's going to help fill in the torso, and then rotate that whole section up. And here we have Crane in his robot mode. So not a bad transformation at all. There's a lot of really cool different things going on in this figure that we haven't seen on the other guys. I really like that leg transformation with the front panel assembly sort of swapping around. The feet are definitely done a bit nicer too. They have a nice physical click into place, so the ankles actually feel pretty secure, but you still get that ankle rocker or ankle rotation here, which is nice. In terms of articulation, you get the standard ball peg head joint. You do have a hinge here too, so you can kind of cheat and get some further down looks if you want to. Shoulders are really nice. You get a pretty good outward rotation there. You do have an additional joint or swivel, or I guess a hinge in here, so this can actually move around quite a bit more. And you can actually pull these all the way down if you want to. But full rotation. Of course, we got to be careful though, because the way these arms maneuver down, you might be displacing some of these panels and stuff. Just be mindful. You shouldn't have to reconfigure things too often as you're moving it around. Double jointed elbows get you basically almost a full crunch right there for the arm. These panels here, just like Mixmaster, can move around. They can move upwards, spin around 180. They move pretty freely. No ratchets on these though, so you might be doing some more manipulation to get things symmetrical if that's important to you. You do have a waist swivel, obstructed a little bit by this back kibble, but you can get some motion, you know, to move that around. Also, make sure these ladders flip backwards just to get them out of the way. A little bit of an eyesore for the robot. Upper thigh swivel. You get a knee bend. Be mindful of this kibble though. You might have to rotate that around a little bit to get this stuff moving around. I mean, you can theoretically get about 90 degrees. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in just a second, but that can kind of get in the way. And they are on these thin pieces of plastic, so be careful when you're manipulating these. You don't want to put too much torque onto them and potentially snap those off. These pieces don't lock into place like one of the major complaints that Generation Toys has had for a lot of their figures, but these are actually pretty tight. So unlike Long Haul, whose side leg kibble kind of flapped around, once you position these really are not going to move around at all. So this is not a bad design, I don't think. I don't mind these physically not tapping in. In terms of foot design, you do get that rotation I mentioned, and you do get some inward ankle rocking. So that's kind of good. Really no forward or backwards rotation though, because it's on a rotation point right here. So kind of a weird foot design. It feels pretty solid. It just doesn't give you everything that you'd be looking for. Again, no front to back rotation, just that left to right in that ankle rocker, but not bad, not bad. Now let's talk about the thigh kibble. That's a bit of an eyesore for me. I don't like it. But what you can do is actually, these are on an individual rotation piece here, right above the knee. So if you're careful, you can sort of flip these around. I find it's a little easier if you go along the interior here. You gotta be really careful doing this though, so you don't snap this plastic. But these can go behind the leg, and you can actually collapse those down behind the knee. So that's the way I'm going to be displaying mine if I keep them in bot mode. It looks pretty clean. It covers the tire up a little bit right there, which isn't a bad thing, and you still get some decent knee articulation. It does cut it back quite a bit. We're getting maybe 45 degrees right there, but I think from an aesthetic standpoint, that is a much cleaner design. Like I said though, be very careful doing this. This one rotated back far easier than the other side. Again, just be mindful. You're dealing with thin plastics on thin joints. You don't want to put too much torque onto that and potentially break a piece. In terms of the backpack, this actually feels pretty secure. It does wiggle a little bit. It's tabbed in on the back via one peg, which isn't the most super secure connection, but it does the job pretty well. This whole assembly here is obviously pretty back heavy, but you can see it creates sort of a tripod effect. This is not going to be flipping over backwards if you configure it the default way right here. What you can do alternatively though is flip this around, and you can actually even bend this and have the hook kind of hanging straight down. This actually can even unpeg. You can peg this in down below here. This is the second way that they recommend doing it. And again, the crane section plugs back into the base of the green platform. And then that kind of gets you a sort of a unique look if you want to go that way for the crane assembly. Not my cup of tea. I won't be showing them off this way. I kind of like that tripod look, but just options for you. And let's take a look at this gun really quick. This comes out of storage like so. It has a telescoping nose or nozzle here, which you pull on until it kind of clicks into place. You can fold down the handle, and he holds this pretty well. Here we go. So from an aesthetic standpoint, I think this guy actually works pretty damn well. I love the updated head sculpt here. Speaking of, let's go ahead and get this guy taken out, the replacement head. And you can see this is sort of an updated look. It's not very hook accurate, but this is the initial design they had shown off with their resin prototypes from like a year or two ago, which I think some people really liked, and I do. I think it's a pretty nice looking head. It just doesn't feel very hook accurate to me. So they went ahead and, like some of the other bots, resculpted it, gave us some more of the traditional head shapes that we're looking for. And I think the pre-installed head sculpt looks really, really nice. And we do get some light piping popping through there in the back. It makes those orange eyes kind of glow, which is pretty cool. In terms of paint, again, mostly silvers, purples, greens throughout. The actual paint, we have the nice silver throughout the torso, the thighs. I love the orange accents on the chest. That looks really sharp. Has, again, a nice contrast against the purple. Some nice purple and silver detailing throughout there. All mixed in with the gray plastics and darker gray metallic paints and stuff. I think this looks really sharp. And even these clear plastic pieces on the lower legs are not really an eyesore. They kind of just have some nice visual breakup on the figure. And again, a lot of like the safety hazard stripings and stuff shows up pretty nicely. It's pretty prominently displayed on the legs and stuff right there. And despite him being a crane with a giant crane backpack, I think the backpack actually cleans up pretty well. Even considering we have a giant combiner head stuffed back there too. It's not that bad. I mean, looking at the arm here, pulled forward, you can see that, yeah, it has a backpack, but it's not that obtrusive. It actually cleans up pretty well and compacts pretty nicely. So yeah, I think this is a pretty nice representation of the character. Again, it really kind of fits that aesthetic design that Generation Toys is going for with the rest of this line. I think this really fits the part for a hook representation that's a bit more modernized, maybe a bit IDW inspired, but certainly their own sort of unique take or spin on the series. He really kind of fits that bill really well. So final thoughts on Generation Toys' 6th member of the Gravity Builder team. I think Crane is pretty nice. This is not a perfect figure by any means, and I'm going to touch upon some flaws. Stress marks. We got them. Yeah, right there on the hip flaps, there's a big white stress mark there and a big white stress mark there. So that's a problem. And these aren't really pieces that I see myself manipulating or moving around too often, but it's a bummer. And it's definitely showing me that despite the delays, this is a figure that unfortunately could have used an additional pass for just to polish this up and get it refined to the same level that the other 5 figures have. And I think Generation Toys probably felt the pressure getting this set completed. Obviously, they threw in the Mega Sorry additional figure, the Build-A-Figure, which is a really nice touch. So props to Generation Toys for, caring and trying to, do right by the customers. So I appreciate that. But it doesn't change the fact that this definitely needs a bit more polish. The fact that the crane fell off during my transformation, and I had to actually, step aside for 5 minutes to fix that before continuing, that's an issue. Things like little tolerances. Again, these little thigh flaps aren't necessarily designed to go back here, but they should have been considered as an option to go back here, because it looks a hell of a lot nicer. So I don't know. So I feel like the tolerances to get these rotated right above the knee should have been super smooth. Be careful manipulating those. I mean, this looks a lot better, so if you want that look, by all means, go for it, but just be careful. Don't break it. Things like the foot design, just kind of weird. No up or down or forward or backwards tilting. I feel like the backpack it's pretty secure, but it probably could have used one additional peg, or just improve the peg tolerances to just sort of secure that a touch tighter. Yeah, it's little things like that. There's really not a lot of additional flaps, obviously, aside from these. One of the big complaints Generation Toys has had is, like forearm kibble on long haul, for example, or a lot of sort of things like flaps and tabs which don't physically have tabs to peg into to secure them. This guy actually feels pretty nice in that regard. Now, I did mention an issue with like the screws being too short. I got this from an overseas retailer. This is a first run. If you are buying this from the United States or any like the stateside retailers, this shipment for this figure has been delayed by an additional week to 2 weeks that I've heard. And that's because supposedly Generation Toys has delayed the release of this figure to correct a screw issue. And I think, again, the crane falling off is a good indicator that might be true. So if you are buying this stateside, I would say you probably don't have anything to worry about, because what they are doing is recalling the figures, the shipments, replacing the screws that were too short that were used on the figure, and then reshipping them back out stateside. So props, again, to Generation Toys for addressing it, recognizing that there was an issue and taking care of their customers. But if you are an early adopter and you aren't buying it from a stateside retailer or a retailer that's getting it in later, then you potentially might be getting a first run like me. You might have to watch out for things like screws and things maybe popping off. So I'm a little hesitant about this guy. I have contacted my retailer. They haven't heard any issues with that screw problem that I'm talking about, but other online retailers have. So We'll see what happens. I may be shipping this guy back to get an updated version if, you know, the whole screw issue is actually accurate. So we'll see. I think if you are buying this, though, stateside, or if your retailer of choice has yet to get these in or is getting them in by maybe the end of the month, I wouldn't worry, because those should be the the version 2 of the figure coming out. But guys, with that being said, a pretty cool figure. I think he's worth checking out. Obviously, if you're buying Generation Toys Gravity Builder, you're all in for this line anyway. I think just from a visual standpoint, I think he looks like one of the best figures of the line. I'm a huge fan of how this guy looks. And you know what? We got another review coming up shortly. I'm going to be getting that Gravity Builder, aka Devastator, all put together. Stay tuned for that. I'll have all 6 bots in alt mode, so we can take a look at those side by side. We'll get them all in robot mode to check out the actual badass team that they are. And then we'll get this guy in his combined mode and check that out as well. So thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned. Later, guys.